So what are some of the key things that affect your Spanish fluency besides vocabulary and grammar? Of course, vocab and grammar are an important part of the puzzle, but there's also the psychological side, how you think about improving and applying what you've learned. Now, for the most part, the psychological side is essentially about getting out of the way. Fluency is something that develops naturally. Every time you learn a new word, hear a phrase, or speak a little, your brain is already moving towards fluency. The problem is, many students, without realizing it, develop habits that hold them back. They interrupt the very process that would make them fluent and end up staying stuck longer than they need to. In this video, I'm going to share 3 mindset shifts that will help you remove those blocks and let fluency develop naturally the way it's meant to. So firstly, fluency doesn't break down because students don't know enough. It breaks down when they hesitate, searching for the perfect word and missing the moment to speak. Let me give you a quick example. One of my students told me this story last week. She was in a taxi in a Spanish-speaking country when the driver asked her, ¿De dónde eres? Where are you from? She understood the question immediately, and she could have said, Los Estados Unidos. She knew this, but she had just learned the phrase, Soy estadounidense, and she wanted to say it properly. So she paused, mentally searching for the exact phrase, how to use it, and how to pronounce it. And after a few seconds of silence, the driver assumed she didn't understand the question and said, País? País? So the moment passed. She already had an answer. She knew what she could say, but she was focused on remembering the best version. So she didn't say anything at all. I'm curious to know if this has happened to you. Can you relate to this student's experience in the taxi? If you have a similar story, please share it in the comments. And in previous videos, I've mentioned that I'm not a big fan of using fluency as a goal because it doesn't have a clear definition, which makes it hard to measure and hard to work toward. But for this video, I'm going to use fluency to mean flow in a conversation. Someone says something to you, you respond, and you go back and forth smoothly. Now, for this definition, you don't need a vast vocabulary or razor-sharp grammar. You just need to focus on getting a conversation to go back and forth as best you can at your current skill level. Our simple metaphor might be playing a game of soccer. It doesn't have to be a perfect pass. You just have to keep the ball moving. And to make this happen, the first mindset shift is to react instead of remember. Don't search for the best answer. React with what you've got. And real conversations, fluency isn't about saying the best sentence. It's about saying something quickly. The longer you pause and search for the perfect phrase, the more you disrupt the flow for you and the person you're talking to. Now, as a Spanish teacher, I often find that students who speak with the best flow or fluency aren't the ones who know the most Spanish. They're the ones that do a really good job of reacting with what they've got. Now, of course, if you don't understand the question or you genuinely don't know how to respond at all, that's okay. This first mindset shift isn't about forcing yourself to speak before you are ready. It's about breaking the habit of freezing when you actually do have enough language to say something, even if it's simple. Instead of searching for the perfect phrase, say the version that is already in your head. Los Estados Unidos or Soy de Estados Unidos might not feel as advanced as Soy estadounidense, but it keeps the conversation moving. And when you are studying, it is fine to practice active recall. In fact, it's one of the best ways to grow your knowledge. But when you are out speaking with people and working on your flow, react to what is being said. Stay in the moment with the person you're speaking with, like you would when you're having a flowing conversation in your first language. As you get better at this, you will feel more fluent and people will perceive you as more fluent even if your vocabulary and grammar are at the same level. Now, building on this first mindset shift, which is all about searching for the perfect response, the next one is about another common habit, searching for the perfect translation. When students come across new phrases, expressions, or grammatical structures, instead of being okay with a general sense of the meaning, they often feel the need to translate everything back into English, sometimes word for word, to check their understanding. A good example of this occurs whenever I teach the phrase lo que. Many students tell me that they like to think of this phrase in English as that which. Let me know if this is something you like to do in the comments. Now, I usually recommend students avoid this kind of direct translation. This is because that which is not that common in everyday spoken English. But more importantly, translating between English and Spanish adds an extra layer of mental processing that interrupts the flow of conversation. For example, let's say you want to express an idea like He doesn't understand what I want. And the first thing your brain does is, oh, I'm pretty sure I need to change this in English to, he doesn't understand that which I want. Then you mentally check that this works in English. And then you think, okay, now I know I can use lo que in Spanish. And so then you translate it into Spanish. No entiende lo que quiero. Now, this requires several steps of mental processing. And of course, this will break your flow. Now, the ultimate goal in developing fluency is being able to say Spanish phrases like this with as few mental steps as possible. And to build towards that, it helps to be okay with just a general sense of the meaning of a phrase. Instead of stress testing a phrase by checking how it sounds in English, try stress testing it within Spanish by swapping out a few words. So starting with the sentence, no entiende lo que quiero, if we know this means he doesn't understand what I want, we can then change this to no entiende lo que necesito. He doesn't understand what I need. No entiende lo que tengo. He doesn't understand what I have. No entiende lo que digo. He doesn't understand what I say. We could also change other words and say, no tiene lo que quiero. He doesn't have what I want. No hace lo que quiero. He doesn't do what I want. No sabe hacer lo que quiero. He doesn't know how to do what I want. As you can see, each sentence builds a little, but the core pattern remains the same. Here, you're not translating, you're thinking in chunks. I often refer to this as practicing patterns instead of learning rules. So for mindset shift number 2, focus on patterns and overall meaning. Let go of the need to translate word for word and instead practice with patterns. Now, maybe you feel you can't really understand a phrase unless you translate it. And that's okay, especially early on. Translation is part of the process, but the key is you don't want to stay there. In my experience, even beginners can think in basic Spanish patterns right from the start. And as you learn more, it will get easier to think in more complex patterns. Again, the goal isn't to force anything. It's about trying to get out of the way of fluency developing on its own. So we talked about the need to find the perfect response, then the habit of translating everything back into English. The third mindset shift is a little different. It's not about a specific habit. It's about how you see yourself as a learner. Now, I was working with another student recently who told me she wanted to go on a trip to Peru, but she didn't really feel ready. In her mind, she needed to reach a certain level before she would buy those plane tickets. Now, in my opinion, her Spanish was good enough to do anything that she would need to do on the trip. She could do small talk, she could order food in a restaurant, she could explain herself in a general way if she had to talk to someone who didn't speak any English. And when I pointed this out, she said, I'm not ready. I'm still just a student. And I said, I'm a student too. Spanish is not my first language, and language learning is a lifelong pursuit. And she said, yes, but you can speak Spanish. I can't. In this situation, she was holding herself back, not because of her Spanish skills, but because she didn't yet see herself as someone who could actually use the language. Can you identify with this? Have you ever said, I will do something when my Spanish is good enough? When this happens, we need the third mindset shift, which is going from identifying as a student of Spanish to a user of Spanish. This doesn't mean you stop learning. You will always be learning, but it means you start seeing yourself as someone who can already use the language, even in small ways. Instead of thinking of yourself as a Spanish student, you can think of yourself as a developing Spanish speaker. You want to avoid the idea of waiting until you're ready and start using what you know now, even if it's not perfect. Now, this is because fluency doesn't arrive all at once. It builds through use. Okay, let me know what you thought of this one. Which of these mindset shifts do you think will be most helpful for you? If you enjoyed this video, then please do me a favor and give it a like. And if you want more effective strategies for building your knowledge of Spanish quickly, check out this video here where I talk about what I would do differently if I had to relearn Spanish starting from scratch.